The champagne glass slipped from her hand the moment she hit the floor. I still remember the sound, that sharp, delicate crack against the marble, echoing through the room like a gunshot. My daughter-in-law's mother, Lorraine, was convulsing at my feet, foam gathering at the corners of her mouth. Guests froze mid-laugh, the kind of silence that feels heavy enough to choke you. And all I could think was, that wasn't supposed to happen to her. Everyone else was screaming. Chairs scrape. Someone dropped a plate. But me. I just stood there, staring at Lorraine's trembling fingers, thinking about the glass she drank from, the one that wasn't meant for her. Before I go any further, let me say this much. I'm not naive. 70 years on this earth teaches you to read people, especially when you've built a fortune from scratch in a world that never wanted you to succeed. So when someone tries to poison you, at your own retirement party no less, you notice. You notice everything. 2 hours earlier, my kitchen had been filled with music, laughter, and the hum of polite celebration. I'd just sold my consulting firm, the company I'd started after my husband died, for $24 million. Everyone told me it was time to slow down. My son, Daniel, insisted on throwing the party. "Mom, you've worked your whole life. You deserve this," he said, all soft eyes and sincerity. "Let Hannah handle everything. You just relax." Relax. That word always feels like a warning, doesn't it? Hannah, my daughter-in-law, was a woman who could complain about making toast, yet suddenly she was Martha Stewart in heels. Arranging flowers, polishing silver, hiring bartenders. She was radiant that night, beaming like the perfect hostess, all charm and effortless grace. Except it wasn't effortless. I could see it, that flicker of tension in her smile. The way her eyes darted, measuring every move I made. I should have trusted my gut when I noticed her near the drinks table, pretending to fix her lipstick while slipping something from her purse. Small vial. Clear liquid. Quick glance. Then a few drops into one glass. My glass. The one with the tiny chip on the rim. I always used it because it felt familiar. A small imperfection that somehow made it mine. My blood ran cold. But I didn't move. Didn't scream. Didn't confront her. Because sometimes the smartest thing you can do when you spot a snake is to let it think it's cornered you. So I smiled. Pretended to listen to a story about stock markets while Hannah lifted that glass, turned toward me, and crossed the room with a face full of concern. "You look tired, Mom," she said sweetly, holding out the glass. "Here, have some champagne. You've earned it." Took it. Smiled back. Let her believe her plan was working. 10 minutes later, when she was distracted showing off her diamond bracelet to a neighbor, I quietly switched glasses. Mine for Lorraine's, who was standing nearby, looking lost without a drink. Lorraine took it without hesitation. Complimented the flavor. Said it tasted different. And then she collapsed. Hannah screamed. Daniel panicked. And me. I knelt beside the woman who was never supposed to be the one on that floor, my mind racing through every possibility, every motive, every lie that might unravel next. As the sirens wailed in the distance, I realized something chilling. If Hannah had gone through with it, if I hadn't seen her, I'd be the one dying on my own kitchen floor. And the worst part, my son might have helped her. The house still smelled like champagne and panic. I hadn't slept. By sunrise, the balloons had deflated, the catering trays sat abandoned, and the marble floor was scrubbed clean, but no amount of disinfectant could wipe away what I'd seen the night before. Lorraine was still in the hospital. Stable, the doctors said. Acute poisoning, cause undetermined. Undetermined. That word rattled in my head like a loose screw. At 5 a.m, I sat at my kitchen table, nursing a bitter cup of coffee and staring at the bottle that almost ended me. Still 3/4 full. Still sitting innocently on the counter like a snake pretending to sleep. I'd been in business long enough to know that nothing, not even murder, happens without motive. So I started making a list. Daniel. Hannah. Greed. Desperation. I knew their lives too well. Daniel's architecture firm was hanging by a thread. The economy had chewed him up and spit him out. Hannah's home jewelry brand was more of a tax write-off than a business. Their house was a monument to bad decisions. The kind of place people bought when they wanted to look successful. And I'd helped them. Over and over. Few thousand here, a car loan there. Tuition for Emma, their teenage daughter, when they couldn't afford private school. Called it help. But maybe they saw it as something else. An advance. An investment in my eventual death. My phone rang at 7:30. Hannah. Her voice was soft, sugary, the tone people use when they want to sound innocent. Hi, Mom. I couldn't sleep all night thinking about you, she said. After what happened to Mom, I just keep wondering if maybe there was something wrong with the food or drinks. You didn't feel sick at all, did you? The audacity of it almost made me laugh. Checking if her poison had hit its target. No, dear. I feel fine, I said, forcing a warm tone. Have you heard from the hospital? They think maybe she ate something that didn't agree with her, Hannah said quickly. You know how she is with her vitamins. Always mixing things up. That was a lie. Lorraine was meticulous. The kind of woman who color-coded her pillbox. Such a relief, I said softly. For a minute, I was worried it might have been something at the party. Oh no. Definitely not. She rushed the words out, almost tripping over them. The doctors said it wasn't food poisoning. Good, I said. That's good. I hung up before my voice betrayed the fury burning behind my calm. By 9 there was a knock on my door. Daniel, holding a white pastry box from my favorite bakery, like a peace offering from a guilty man. Thought you might not have eaten, he said, setting the box down. You must be shaken after everything that happened. He looked exhausted or maybe haunted. The kind of tired that comes from pretending you don't know something you actually do. I'm fine, I said, pouring coffee. Just trying to make sense of it all. He nodded, eyes down. Yeah, me too. We sat at the table in silence for a while. He picked at a croissant like he was stalling. Then he finally looked up, his face carefully composed. Mom, Hannah and I were talking last night. About your situation. My situation. You're 70, he said gently. Living alone in this big house. After what happened, we think it's time to consider safer options. Safer options. He pulled out his phone, showing me a glossy brochure for a senior living community called Sunset Ridge, a place that looked more like a luxury resort than a retirement home. They have everything, he said. Medical staff, golf courses, social clubs. It's just 20 minutes from us. You'd love it. I studied the smiling faces on the screen. Every one of them looked medicated into serenity. And how much does this safety cost? Yes. There's an entrance fee, Daniel said carefully. 400,000. But it covers everything. Housing, meals, medical care for life. I almost laughed. The timing was impeccable. You've already been researching, I said. His cheeks flushed. We just want what's best for you. What's best for me, I repeated. Right. The silence between us turned heavy, the kind that fills a room like smoke. Finally he stood, straightening his shirt. Just think about it, okay? We can go visit next week. I smiled faintly. Sure, Daniel. I'll think about it. He kissed my cheek before leaving, pretending not to notice that my skin had gone cold. The door closed behind him, and I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. They were moving fast. Too fast. And I needed to stay 3 steps ahead. I picked up my phone and dialed my attorney. David, I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hand. We need to talk. Today. By the time I reached David's office, I'd already rehearsed the story a dozen times in my head. The trick was not to sound paranoid. Women my age are always at risk of that label. Confused, overreacting, emotional. Men call it hysteria. I call it survival instinct. David Hartwell had been my attorney for over 20 years. A man so meticulous, he ironed his shoelaces, and so discreet. He could hide a body in a legal clause if he had to. His office smelled like cedar and quiet money, the kind that's been sitting safely in trust funds for generations. Sarah, he said warmly, rising from behind his mahogany desk. How was the retirement party? Eventful, I said dryly. He studied my face for a long second before gesturing toward the leather chair. Tell me everything. So I did. I told him about Lorraine's collapse, about the glass, about Hannah hovering near the champagne with that tiny vial, about Daniel's sudden interest in senior living and the $400,000 entrance fee. David didn't interrupt. He just listened, tapping his pen against his notebook occasionally, a small rhythm that matched the pounding in my chest. When I finished, he leaned back and said quietly, "You're certain about what you saw?" "As certain as I am that I built my company without their help." He nodded. "Then we have two problems, proof and protection. Without evidence, it's just your word against theirs. And if they're already hinting at mental decline, they could use that against you." "Mental decline," I repeated. "They've been preparing for this." "Probably," David said. "There are families who go to incredible lengths to take control of a parent's estate. But your son and daughter-in-law, they're amateurs. Their greed makes them sloppy." I almost smiled. "That's what I'm counting on." David slid a folder toward me. "We'll start by locking everything down. I'll update your will, restructure your trusts, and create medical directives so they can't touch your accounts or claim guardianship." "But Sarah," he hesitated, lowering his voice, "if they've already tried to harm you physically, you need to think about personal safety. Security systems, cameras, panic button even." I stared at him, my jaw tightening. "You think they'll try again?" He didn't answer, which was an answer in itself. "Do it," I said. "All of it." For the next 2 hours we worked in quiet efficiency. Legal jargon became armor. Each signature felt like a brick in the wall I was building between me and the people who shared my blood. When I finally stood to leave, David handed me a business card. "A contact in private security. They specialize in high net worth cases. Discreet, fast, effective." "High net worth," I repeated with a bitter laugh. Funny how those words sound less like a compliment and more like a target these days. He didn't disagree. Driving home, I checked my rearview mirror more times than I could count. Every white SUV looked suspicious, every face familiar. Maybe I was imagining it, or maybe I wasn't. By the time I pulled into my driveway, my hands were trembling. Not from fear but from clarity. I knew now that this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a plan. And plans leave trails. My phone rang as I stepped into the house. "Hannah again." "Sarah." Her voice was bright, brittle. "Just wanted to let you know Mom's home from the hospital. The doctor said she's fine, thank goodness." "That's wonderful news," I said, locking the door behind me. "She doesn't remember much about the party," Hannah continued quickly. "The doctor said that's normal after a shock like that." "How convenient." "I'd love to visit her," I said lightly. "Maybe tomorrow." "Oh, she's not up for visitors yet," Hannah said a little too fast. "Maybe next week." "Of course. You let me know." When I hung up, I stared at my reflection in the dark window. I didn't see a 70-year-old widow. I saw a strategist gearing up for a war her family didn't even know had started. By nightfall, 3 men in unmarked vans pulled up outside my home. The security team David recommended. They spent the day wiring my house with cameras, motion detectors, and alarms. When neighbors asked, I said I'd had trouble with package theft. Let them think that. But as I watched the lights flicker on the new security monitor in my study, a strange calm settled over me. For the first time since the party, I didn't feel like prey. Because while my family was busy planning my downfall, I was already planning theirs. The doorbell rang just as I finished signing the last page of my new will. I checked the monitor. Daniel and Hannah, standing on my front porch like the perfect, grieving family. Faces drawn, dressed in neutral tones, trying hard to look concerned instead of guilty. Funny how people clean up so well when they're coming to finish what they started. Open the door. "Daniel." "Hannah." "What a surprise." "Mom," Daniel said softly. his expression a mix of forced warmth and calculation. "We need to talk." "Of course," I said. "Come in." They settled on the sofa like they were afraid the furniture might bite. Hannah perched forward, eyes scanning the room, and then she spotted it. The new security camera in the corner. "New camera?" she asked lightly. "Package theft," I said. "Can't be too careful these days." That wiped the smile off her face faster than poison in champagne. "So," I said, taking a seat across from them. "What's this about?" Hannah folded her hands, all fake sincerity. "It's about what happened at the party. I feel terrible, Sarah. Truly. If something we brought caused Mom's collapse." I held her gaze. "You think that's possible?" She blinked, thrown off by my tone. "Well, I just mean, accidents happen." "Of course they do." Daniel leaned forward, his voice low and earnest. "Mom, we're just worried about you. After everything that's happened, maybe it's best if we take care of you for a while." There it was. The trap disguised as love. "Take care of me how?" "Yes." "Well," he said, "you could stay with us for a bit. Just until things settle down. You'd have company, meals, help with errands." "Supervision," I said quietly. Daniel frowned. "That's not fair, Mom." "No." "Yes. Because it sounds like a sales pitch, not concern." Hannah's voice sharpened. "You're 70, Sarah. Living alone. What if something happens and no one finds you for days?" It was the same script they'd rehearsed before, the same argument dressed in compassion. They weren't worried about me dying alone. They were worried about me dying too late. "You're right," I said, watching them shift in their seats. "Anything could happen at my age." Their faces relaxed just a little until I added, "That's why I spent yesterday updating my will." The air went cold. "Your will?" Hannah asked carefully. "Yes," I said, smiling faintly. I realized the old one was terribly out of date. Funny how near-death experiences make you think about these things. Daniel's color drained from his face. "What kind of changes?" "Oh, just small ones," I said. "Adjustments to reflect my current priorities." I watched their eyes flicker, panic hidden behind polite smiles. They were calculating, guessing, wondering how much damage I'd already done to their plans. "Well," Hannah said finally, her voice thin, "I'm sure you made the right choice." "I think so too, dear." They left soon after, their goodbye hugs stiff and mechanical. I stood at the window, watching through the monitor as they sat in their car, not leaving, just arguing. Hannah was on the phone, her hands slicing the air, Daniel trying to calm her down. Something had cracked between them. But let it. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat by the window, the glow from the cameras flickering softly in the dark. They thought they were still in control. But the truth was, the moment I smiled at them and mentioned my will, the game changed. Tomorrow I'd make my next move. And this time I wouldn't be reacting. I'd be hunting. It was early, maybe 8 a.m., when the doorbell rang again. For a moment I thought it might be them. Back for round 2. But when I checked the monitor I froze. It wasn't Daniel. It wasn't Hannah. It was Evelyn Grant. Pale, trembling, clutching her purse like it was the only thing keeping her upright. "Evelyn," I said, opening the door. "What on earth are you doing here? You should be resting." She gave a weak smile. "Sarah, I had to talk to you. About that night." Something in her tone, a mix of fear and urgency, made my stomach turn. I helped her inside, settled her on the sofa, and made tea. For a moment she just sat there, staring at her hands. Then she whispered, "Jessica told me I had some kind of medication reaction." I nodded carefully. "That's what she said to me too." Evelyn shook her head slowly. "But I don't take medication, Sarah. Not a single prescription. Haven't for years." The air between us went still. "Then what do you think happened?" I asked quietly. Evelyn looked up, her eyes wide and haunted. "I think my daughter tried to poison you." My pulse skipped. "What makes you say that?" Her voice trembled as she spoke. "Because I remember. I remember everything up until I started feeling dizzy. The champagne tasted strange. Metallic, bitter. And before that, I saw Jessica near the drinks table, doing something with a small bottle. One of those dropper ones. She looked nervous. I felt my throat tighten. A small bottle, I repeated. Evelyn nodded, tears welling. Sarah, she could have killed you. She almost did, I said softly. But she didn't. Evelyn frowned. What do you mean? I took a breath, steady and deliberate. Because I switched our glasses. Her face went white. She tried to kill you, Evelyn whispered, horror dawning. And I drank your poison. Yes. We sat there, in silence so heavy it seemed to hum. For a moment, I wasn't the CEO who'd built a multimillion-dollar company. I wasn't the woman strategizing legal defenses or installing cameras. I was just a 70-year-old woman sitting across from her friend, the friend who almost died in her place. Tears slid down Evelyn's face. Sarah, what are you going to do? I stared into my cup of tea, the steam curling like ghostly fingers. I'm going to give them what they want, I said finally. Evelyn blinked. You're going to let them have your money. Oh no, I said, meeting her eyes. I'm going to let them think they've won. Then I'm going to take everything from them. Slowly, legally, and without mercy. Evelyn looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. Whatever you need, I'm with you. Thank you, I said. But first I need information. Proof. That afternoon, I made a phone call to someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Patricia Langford, a private investigator I'd once hired to dig into a rival company's finances. If anyone could find what I needed, it was her. Patricia. It's Sarah Lang. Well, I'll be damned, she said, her voice warm but curious. Haven't heard that name in a while. You finally sold the company. I did. And now I need your help with something far more personal. Personal how? I need to know everything about my son's finances. And his wife's. Every account. Every loan. Every debt. Leave nothing out. There was a pause on the line. Then, Sarah, that kind of truth can get ugly fast. I'm counting on it, I said. She sighed. Give me 48 hours. When I hung up, I stared out the window at my quiet garden, the one I used to think of as my safe place. But there was no such thing as safe anymore. Not when your own blood had already tried to bury you once. Tomorrow I'd make Daniel come to me. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I'd be the one setting the trap. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was afraid. Not anymore, but because I couldn't stop planning. Every detail of their faces, every lie they'd told, every fake, concerned glance replayed in my head like a bad film I couldn't shut off. But by morning, I knew what I had to do. If they wanted me gone, I'd make them think they'd succeeded. Only this time, I'd be the one writing the script. By noon, I picked up the phone and called Daniel. Hey, Mom, he answered. His voice soft and cautious, the kind you use when you're testing the temperature of a pool before diving in. Daniel, I said, steady and warm. Can you meet me for lunch? I've been thinking about what you and Hannah said. He hesitated. About my safety, the future. Maybe it's time I take it seriously. I could practically hear his shoulders drop in relief. Of course, Mom. That's really good to hear. Where do you want to meet? Our old spot, I said. The place we went after your graduation. There was a pause. Nostalgia always worked on him. I'll be there in 20. Perfect. The restaurant hadn't changed much since that day. Same soft lighting, same floral wallpaper, same faint smell of roasted garlic that somehow made every conversation feel a little more intimate. When he walked in, Daniel looked nervous, too well dressed, too eager. Mom, he said, sitting down. You look great. How are you feeling? Better, I said. Clearer. I've been thinking about my next chapter. Maybe you were right. Maybe it's time for some changes. He smiled, hopeful. That's really smart, Mom. So, what kind of changes? I called Sunset Haven this morning. That got him. His fork clattered against the plate. You did. I did. They have an opening. But I'd have to act quickly. The unit's only available for a few more days. Daniel leaned forward, excitement flashing in his eyes. That's amazing, Mom. You'll love it there. It's a wonderful place. Yes, I said softly. They said I'd need to pay the full fee up front to secure it. He nodded, already doing the math in his head. Of course. You have the funds from the sale. It's just a matter of… I know, I interrupted. It's a big step. That's why I want you and Hannah to help me with the paperwork. I don't want to make any mistakes. His relief was almost painful to watch. Of course, Mom. We'll help you with everything. He thought he was winning. I smiled at him across the table, the way I used to when he was a little boy showing me his art projects. There's just one more thing. What's that? The facility requires a power of attorney. Someone to make decisions for me if I become unable to. His voice was barely steady. You want me to handle that? Who else? Said. You're my son. For a moment, guilt flickered across his face. Faint but visible. Then it vanished, replaced by something that looked like triumph. Thank you, Mom, he said, taking my hand. You won't regret this. Oh, I said, smiling. I know I won't. When I got home, I called Patricia. She answered on the first ring. Tell me you found something, I said. Her tone was grave. You might want to sit down. I'm already sitting. Sarah, it's bad. They're drowning in debt. The house has been refinanced multiple times. Their credit cards are maxed out. They've even got a second mortgage and a line of credit that's completely tapped. Closed my eyes. How bad? 80,000 in revolving debt. Maybe more. And that's not all. There was a pause, the kind that stretches the airtight. Go on, I said. 6 months ago, Hannah took out a life insurance policy on you. $500,000. She's listed as the beneficiary. My stomach turned. That's not even legal. She claimed to be your caregiver, Patricia said. The company didn't question it. For a long moment I said nothing. They hadn't just planned to take my money. They'd planned my death like it was a business deal. Patricia, I said quietly. You've done enough. Send me everything you have. Are you sure you're ready to see it all? Oh, I'm past ready, I said. Now it's my turn. When I hung up, I looked around my house, the one I built, the one they wanted to take from me. And I smiled. Tomorrow, Daniel and Hannah would walk right into my home again, convinced they were claiming their victory. And that's when they'd realize, too late, that I was no longer the one being hunted. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. The house was silent, too silent. That kind of stillness that hums with anticipation. I made myself coffee, black and strong, and stood by the window watching the first gray streaks of light break across the garden. Today was the day. By noon, they'd come smiling to my door again, papers in hand, ready to finish what they thought they'd started. And I would be waiting. I checked the living room, the camera light was on. The security system recording. Every angle covered. Every lie about to meet its proof. When the doorbell finally rang, I almost laughed. Daniel and Hannah stood outside, dressed neatly, their faces painted with that practiced expression of concern and false reassurance. Mom, Daniel said, stepping forward, his voice honey-smooth. We brought the paperwork. We thought we could get everything finalized before lunch. Of course, I said, smiling as I opened the door wide. Come in. The moment they entered, they both scanned the room, a reflex. Predators checking the terrain. Hannah's eyes flicked to the camera in the corner. New system, she asked. Package thefts, I said casually. You can't be too careful these days. She smiled thinly. Right. Of course. They spread the paperwork out on the table like two magicians preparing for a trick. This one's for the facility agreement, Daniel said. And this one's the power of attorney. It's pretty standard. Just gives me authority to handle financial stuff if you can't. I nodded slowly, flipping through the pages, pretending to read while my mind was 10 steps ahead. Seems a bit broad, doesn't it? Said. You'd have access to all my accounts, investments, even property decisions. Daniel's tone softened. Mom, it's just in case of an emergency. You trust me, don't you? That word, trust, landed like a stone in my chest. Of course I do, I said, smiling faintly. You're my son. He exhaled, relieved, the predator mistaking my calm for surrender. I'll sign it, I said finally. Hannah's face lit up like Christmas morning. Oh, Sarah, that's wonderful. You'll feel so much safer once everything's settled. I reached for the pen, the weight of it cold in my hand. My fingers didn't shake. Not once. I signed the papers, 1, 2, 3 strokes of ink. Then I placed the pen down and looked up at them. There, I said softly. Done. Daniel's smile faltered slightly. You're sure you're okay with this? Oh, absolutely, I said. I just need my lawyer to finalize the tax documents before the transfer. He'll be here any moment. Daniel's head snapped up. Your lawyer? Yes, David Hartman. You've met him before. I glanced toward the window. Right on cue, a car pulled into the driveway. But when the doorbell rang, it wasn't David standing there. It was 2 police officers. Mrs. Walker? The woman asked, her tone calm, professional. Detective Morrison. We'd like to ask you a few questions about an incident at your home earlier this week. Daniel froze. What incident? The detective opened a small notebook. The suspected poisoning. We received the toxicology results this morning. The champagne your guest drank contained concentrated oleander extract, a deadly poison. Hannah went still. Her face drained of color. That's impossible, she whispered. That was my mother. She had an allergic reaction. Actually, the detective interrupted, the hospital confirmed it wasn't an allergy. Someone added oleander directly to the champagne bottle. We also found residue in a single glass, one that matched Mrs. Walker's set. The poison was meant for you, ma'am. The air went thin. Daniel turned toward Hannah, disbelief twisting his face. Hannah, he said slowly. What did you do? She shook her head, trembling. I didn't, Daniel, you have to believe me, I didn't. The detective stepped forward, pulling another file from her briefcase. Mrs. Hartwell, we also discovered a life insurance policy you took out 6 months ago, on Mrs. Walker's life. You're listed as the sole beneficiary. No, Hannah whispered. That's not what you think. I stood calm and quiet, my voice steady as marble. Detective, may I add something? The woman nodded. I saw her, I said. That night. I saw Hannah pour something into my glass. I switched them before she handed it to me. Daniel's eyes snapped to me. Horrified, betrayed, breaking. You knew, he breathed. Oh, I knew, I said softly. And I wanted to see how far you'd both go. Hannah's face twisted into panic. You're lying. You're just trying to. Enough, the detective said firmly. Mrs. Hartwell, you're under arrest for attempted murder. As the cuffs clicked shut, Hannah turned toward me, her voice low and venomous. You think you've won. You have no idea what you've done. I met her gaze. Oh, I do. I just did it better. They led her away, the echo of her heels fading down my hallway. And Daniel, he just stood there, hollow and small, the reality crashing in like a wave he couldn't outrun. He looked at me with eyes full of disbelief. Mom, I didn't know she'd actually. But I cut him off gently. Didn't you? The silence between us was worse than any scream. When the door closed behind the detectives, the house fell silent. No sirens, no shouting. Just silence, thick, suffocating silence. Daniel was still standing in the middle of my living room, staring at the empty doorway where his wife had just been taken. His face looked hollow. His lips moved, but no words came out. For a long time I just watched him. My son, the same boy who once brought me dandelions and called them roses. Now he couldn't even look me in the eye. Mom, he finally whispered, his voice breaking. I swear to you, I didn't know she was going to do that. I didn't answer. Not yet. I just waited. Because when you've lived long enough, you learn that silence makes liars tell the truth faster than questions ever could. He rubbed his hands over his face, pacing. She said this was just about helping you. About keeping you safe. About my money, I said quietly. He froze. The look on his face, that flinch, that flicker of shame, told me everything I needed to know. Mom, he said again, almost pleading. We were drowning. The business, it's gone. The debts, it's worse than you think. Hannah said if something happened to you naturally. Cut him off. Naturally. He swallowed hard. She said it wasn't murder. That you were 70 and anything could happen. Heart attack. Fall. She made it sound like it was inevitable. Like we were just planning for the future. I laughed. Not out of humor but disbelief. So the plan was to wait until I died naturally. As long as you could push me into a nursing home first? Mom, please. No, I said sharply. You listen. You tried to have me declared incompetent. You and that woman. You paid a psychiatrist, Dr. Steinberg, right? His face drained of color. How? Because I know, I said, my voice steel now. I know you paid him for consultations months before you ever mentioned Sunset Haven. You had a backup plan, Daniel. If I didn't sign over power of attorney willingly, you'd have me declared unfit. You were going to strip me of everything I built, every single thing I worked for. He buried his face in his hands. I didn't want it to go that far. Hannah said it was just paperwork. Just in case you got confused or... I slammed my hand on the table, hard enough to make the glass rattle. Confused. I was never confused, Daniel. Not about you. Not about her. And certainly not about what the two of you were planning. Tears ran down his cheeks, silent and pathetic. I was desperate, Mom. You don't understand. I do understand, I said quietly. You wanted the easy way out. You wanted my money to fix the mess you made. But the thing is, Daniel, money doesn't fix who you are. He looked up then, his eyes red, his voice trembling. You've destroyed my life. I stared at him for a long moment. No, sweetheart. You destroyed your own life. I just stopped you before you destroyed mine. He dropped to the couch, defeated. His phone buzzed on the table beside him, lighting up with a dozen messages. Probably reporters, lawyers, people already smelling the scandal. I picked up the papers from the floor, the same ones I'd signed hours ago, and placed them in front of him. You should probably know, I said evenly. Those power of attorney papers you were so eager for? They're fake. His head jerked up. What? They give you full control, I continued, over a bank account that contains exactly $1. That's all you get. That's all you ever will. He stared at me, stunned. You can't do that. Oh, I already did. The rest, the real money, is locked away. Protected in trusts you can't touch. If you're convicted of conspiracy, you lose even the small stipend I left you. His mouth opened like he wanted to protest, but no sound came. For the first time since the night of the party, I saw it. That small flicker of recognition in his eyes. The moment he realized who he was up against. Not his aging mother. Not a fragile widow. But a woman who'd built an empire from ashes and knew exactly how to protect it. He looked at me, truly looked at me, and whispered, I'm sorry. I believed he meant it. But it didn't matter. Because sometimes sorry comes too late. I turned toward the window. The sky was darkening, heavy with rain. Somewhere outside, a police car passed, its siren echoing faintly down the street. When I looked back at Daniel, he was still sitting there. The boy I raised, the man who betrayed me, the stranger I'd outsmarted. Get up, I said quietly. Go home. The police will call you soon. Tell them the truth. It's the only decent thing left for you to do. He hesitated, then stood, shoulders slumped. Mom, will you ever forgive me? I didn't answer. Because forgiveness is a gift you give someone who's learned their lesson. And I wasn't sure he ever would. As the door closed behind him, I stood alone in my living room again, surrounded by the quiet hum of the cameras and the faint ticking of the clock. The storm outside began to break, rain falling hard, cleansing, relentless. And for the first time in weeks I exhaled. It was over, or so I thought. 3 months later, the roses bloomed again. It's strange how life keeps moving, even after everything collapses. The sun still rises. The flowers still open. The world doesn't stop for heartbreak. Not even a mother's. I sat in my garden that morning, coffee in hand, watching the petals shimmer in the light. They'd always been my husband's pride. He'd planted them 20 years ago, swearing they'd outlive us both. He was right. Now, they were the only witnesses left to what my family had become. Hannah was sentenced first. 15 years for attempted murder. The courtroom was packed, her sobs echoing against the marble walls as if the sound could soften her guilt. Didn't. She looked for me once, her eyes wild, desperate, searching for pity. I gave her none. Daniel's case followed. Conspiracy, fraud, obstruction. His lawyer fought hard, painting him as the victim of manipulation, a husband who'd fallen under his wife's control. Maybe there was some truth in that. Maybe not enough to matter. He got 3 years. 3 years to think about what he'd done. I didn't attend the sentencing. I'd heard enough lies in one lifetime. The press had a field day. Family fortune and poisoned champagne. Son's wife tries to kill mother-in-law over millions. They made me sound like some tragic figure, the matriarch who outsmarted her assassins. But I wasn't a victim. I was a survivor. Still, the house felt different. Too quiet. Too big. Sometimes late at night, I'd walk through the halls and catch myself remembering. The laughter from birthdays, the smell of cinnamon rolls on Sunday mornings, the sound of Daniel's little feet racing down the stairs. Then I'd remember his face the day the police came. Pale, terrified, guilty. And I'd feel that familiar ache in my chest again. Not anger. Not even betrayal. Just grief. The kind that doesn't scream, it just settles in your bones and stays there. But life has a way of offering you new beginnings when you least expect them. Emma called. My granddaughter. 16 years old, wiser than most adults I know. Her voice cracked when she said, "Grandma, I'm so sorry. I didn't know what they were planning. I swear." "I know, sweetheart," I told her. "None of this is your fault. Can I come visit you this summer?" she asked. I need to see you. I need to understand." That broke me in the best possible way. "Yes," I said, smiling through tears. "I'd love that." When we hung up, I sat there for a long time, holding my phone like it was something sacred. Maybe, just maybe, that call was the start of something new. A piece of my family that hadn't been poisoned by greed. Helen, too, the woman who'd nearly died that night, had become a friend. A strange friendship, born from shared trauma, but real nonetheless. We met twice a week for coffee. 2 women who'd survived the unthinkable, now sitting in a cafe, laughing softly about how ridiculous life can be. "You ever think about how close they came to getting away with it?" she asked once. Smiled. "They never had a chance." Helen chuckled. "You're colder than you look, Sarah." "No," I said. "Just experienced." She was thinking about writing a book, about elder exploitation and inheritance abuse. I told her to do it. People needed to hear stories like ours. Because the truth is, it's not just about money. It's about trust. It's about how the people you love most can sometimes mistake kindness for weakness, and how wrong they are when they do. When David, my attorney, stopped by that afternoon, he had a briefcase in hand and a smile that actually reached his eyes for once. "Good news," he said, setting it on the table. "The insurance company has officially voided the policy Hannah took out on your life. All premiums refunded." I raised an eyebrow. "That's something, I suppose." "There's more," he said. "Michael's creditors are liquidating his assets to cover debts, including the house. They're asking if you'd like to make an offer." I looked out the window, the same direction where my roses swayed in the wind. That house had once been their castle, their pride, their lie. "No," I said finally. Let someone else have it. Someone who can afford it honestly. David nodded and handed me another envelope. Your trust restructuring is complete. Everything's airtight. If anyone ever tries to have you declared incompetent again, the trust automatically transfers to charity. Smiled. That's poetic. Justice usually is, he said, and left me with the papers. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I poured myself a glass of wine, from a new bottle of course, and sat on the porch. The air was soft. The world, for once, quiet in all the right ways. I thought about everything I'd lost, and everything I'd regained. My peace, my power, name. But mostly I thought about Emma. Because maybe this story wasn't ending. Maybe it was just beginning again. This time with someone who still believed in love without a price tag. The roses are blooming again. It's funny how they seem brighter this year. As if the earth itself decided I'd earned a little beauty after everything. I watch them every morning now, coffee in one hand, peace in the other. The house feels different. Lighter, freer, almost sacred. Maybe because for the first time in years, it belongs completely to me again. No ghosts. No whispers of betrayal. Just silence, the good kind. The kind that feels like healing. People still stop me sometimes. At the grocery store, the bank, even on my evening walks. You're that woman, they'll say. The one who caught her family before they killed her. I always smile politely. I'm the woman who survived, I say. That's enough. But survival isn't the whole story. This wasn't just about poison in a glass or money in a bank. It was about control, who has it, who thinks they deserve it, and what happens when you take it back. Because here's what I've learned. Growing old doesn't make you weak. It makes you sharp. It makes you quiet enough to notice what others think you've stopped seeing. People love to underestimate women like me. Women with silver in their hair and decades in their bones. They forget that experience is a weapon sharper than any knife. And when they finally realize that, it's already too late. Emma came to visit last month. She's taller now, with that same spark in her eyes her father once had, before greed dimmed it. She sat across from me on the porch, talking about her plans for college, for law school. I want to help people, she said. People who get taken advantage of, like you. I smiled at that. Then you'll do great things, sweetheart. Just remember one thing. What's that? Kindness is strength, I told her. But never let anyone mistake it for weakness. She nodded, and for a moment I saw it. The next generation of this family, wiser, stronger, unbroken. Maybe that's what redemption looks like. Not forgiveness, but evolution. When she left, I walked through the garden one last time before sunset. The air smelled like rain and roses. I stopped by the oldest bush, the one my husband planted, and touched a single petal. Looks like we made it, I whispered. And maybe I finally understood what peace really meant. It wasn't about winning. It wasn't about revenge. It was about surviving with your soul intact. About walking away without becoming what tried to destroy you. Because power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just breathes. Sometimes it smiles. Sometimes it grows roses in the ruins. So yes, I'm 70. But I'm not powerless. I never was. And if life has taught me anything, it's this. You can lose everything and still find yourself standing taller than before. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't justice or punishment. It's peace. Real quiet, earned peace. I sit back, the evening light spilling gold across the garden. And for the first time in a long, long while, I feel whole. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe. And if you've ever lived through something that changed you, share your story in the comments. Your story matters. Your voice matters.